I'm Jordan Belfort, and this is Sales School. We're on Customers for Life here, right? It's the last module on certification, right? Just the beginning of your training. So we're gonna go on and on until you guys are just, getting this stuff like at the highest level. And also remember, it's not just about becoming proficient technically with the straight line. That's pretty easy to get to, 3-6 months, right? To really gain absolute proficiency. But remember, it's also about showing up and using this at the highest level, applying it. And that's an ongoing affair. You never stop learning, you never stop growing. On some level, either you're growing or you're dying. There is no stagnation. You can't just stay the same, right? You grow or you die. So you're always gonna be growing your knowledge base and so forth. That being said, let's get specific, right? I wanna go through a specific strategy here. Really more of like an overarching principle I want you to always remember. And that is that when you're out there, either in the field, banging on doors, behind the desk, making phone calls, whether you're someone that's getting leads on the internet and you're just, doing strategy calls and closing that way, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation as a salesperson when you've had a really amazing referrer of business. I have always managed to find these like AAA referrers. These are people who give you not just 1, 2, or 3, they actually almost make it a business of giving you massive referrals. And one client give you 20, 30, 50 leads. 50 new accounts. They start off as leads, but these people are basically pre-sold, right? Because the second 10 is already established, right? And by default, the third 10 and almost the first 10 is pretty well established as well. But that second 10, when someone refers you, and then by default, your service that you provide, that it's AAA, right? You're entering on the 95-yard line of a 100-yard dash, basically, right? It's like almost cheating. And I'll tell you a story about a company. It was called Farron Tax in Long Island. Farron Tax Services, F-A-R-I-N, real company, right? Nicest people in the world. I was out there doing door-to-door mortgages, as I've told you in the past, right? And I always had a couple of people I was training. I'd take them out into the field. I was making a ton of money, and I walked into this place, and here's my typical get out, no soliciting required. Why would I ever want to do blah, blah, blah? And of course, 15 minutes later, they're my best friends, using all the principles we've spoken about with the straight line system. But this one tax service ended up giving me no less than 150 referrals that ended up being clients, with the average commission being about $8,000 to $10,000 per. Do the math. It's $1 million. And it was every single year. This one company gave me that many referrals. Now, in certification training, right, there's a lesson that just strictly focuses on how you go out and get referrals. What's the system for it? There's a strategy and a very, concrete, defined system that I use. But I want to tell you that system is directly dependent on everything else you've learned before this. You can't just execute a referral system without knowing the rest of the straight line, because so much of what we use to get referrals is essentially interconnected and anchored to the things that you did while you were closing. The questions that you asked, the active listening that you did that just made them understand that you truly cared, that rapport you built as a result of that, the way you created massive logical certainty and emotional certainty, the way your loops were done in just the right way. It was the sum of all those amazing things that you did with the straight line that turned someone that maybe would have just said, yeah, all right, fine, I'll do it. And they close because you're exceeding their action threshold. So someone with let's say not even me, but a middle of the road action threshold. 8.5 collective action threshold, right? So you got into an 8.6, they buy. That's a very simplistic measure here, but I'm just trying to give you some, a visual to think about here, right? So they're at an 8.5 action threshold. You got into a collective level of certainty of 8.6, so they buy. You ask for the order, they say, yeah, let's do it, right? Is that person gonna give you massive referrals on the spot? No way. They're not. In fact, when I go out there and I do my research, as I always do, before I actually do a lesson, I always say, is there anything else out there that I can, add into this, pick up. But if I find something that's great and there's someone who invented it, I'll give them credit, as you always know. I always say, I learned this from Bandler, I learned this from this one or that one, right? I always tell you, I said Robert Cialdini. I always quote the people I learned from. I wish it was a lot more frequent that I actually learned something from someone when it comes to sales, but most of the stuff out there is utter garbage. But even worse, a lot of it is just toxically false. And that's what I'm driving at with referrals. If you go out there and look at, what's the strategy for getting referrals? When's the best time to ask? You know what they say? After you've delivered the product and they've seen the benefits, that's the key time to ask for referrals. Guess what? Not with the straight line. You know why? Because if you have someone with an 8.5 action threshold, okay, and you close them, you probably had a 9.8, 9.79, maybe even a 10, by the way. In other words, what we do through looping is we don't just look to, slide through by the skin of our teeth and close that way. I mean, we barely exceed the action threshold. But most people without the straight line, when they close, they've done that. They've barely created enough certainty to get the job done. You think that person's going to give you a referral? No way. They're barely questioning whether or not they made the right decision themselves. The point is, why was I able to get all of these referrals always on the day I closed? It was never like I didn't call back 3 months later and get referrals. I didn't have to. And my people don't have to. You know why? Because we get them so certain and feeling so in tune with you, such tight rapport, logically and emotionally, they could tell you care. They're more than happy to give you referrals right then on the spot, the day you close them. Understand that? In other words, you don't have to wait some arbitrary time. When you hear about that and you read about that from other places, you know what it's about? It's because they don't know how to close the right way using a straight line, so they eke out this close versus, bam, really closing with the straight line and getting a really, a customer's really sure about they making a great decision there, future-paced emotion as well. That person gives you referrals on the spot. You get it? So I just want you to think about this. As you're out there, every time you close, I want you asking for referrals. Bottom line. Now, if you're not on certification, please just get on it for your own sake at this point. This one lesson alone that shows you how to really just build up a massive stream of referrals. It's a 6-step process with like a bonus step in there as well. It's just so powerful until itself worth 10 times, or worth 100 times the training. Just so you know, all right? But that's my message today. I want you to be out there. Never forget that when you close, that's when the sale begins. It doesn't end. I always say, the sale really begins when you get hit with your first objection. That's true. And then it begins anew once they say, yeah, let's do it. And the second they say yes, great, welcome aboard. I start my customers for life onboarding and adoption strategies, which starts from the first words I say. Talk about that tomorrow, all right? But I'm always in my mind already future pacing to when and how am I going to ask for referrals right then and there. And of course, I don't stop, meaning I'm not going to say I'll only ask the first day. No, there's continued programs we have for generating referrals every single month, every quarter, end of year programs. But the point is, I want you asking when they buy, because you deserve to be able to do that, because you've earned the right by doing a great job. All right, love you all. Talk again tomorrow.